Absolutely.
So, Elemental is a movie where the elements of fire, water, earth, and air all live together in one big city. And fire, water, earth, and air kind of live pretty harmoniously, but fire is sort of pushed to the side in their own little uh, cul-de-sac, if you will. um, and there's this fire woman named Ember who wants to take over her father's shop. Um, but there's all sorts of problems getting in the way. And then she meets a water man named Wade, and sparks fly. And and they think for the first time, oh, maybe I could be with someone different than myself, or um, venture outside my comfort zone. Very typical type of thought.
Theaters seem to love it.
Yeah, this seemed like the definition of a Disney adult audience. It seemed like people who were very into Disney animation, and I like Disney too. But these were people who, and I'm not going to spoil anything, were audibly sobbing, weeping during sad moments, clapping as if as if the actors were live in front of them. It was jarring. It was jarring.
This movie is Pixar's first sort of step into a rom-com. Uh,
Mm,
I actually didn't really look up the movie that much. I don't like spoiling myself. I don't like looking at like who's in the movie, especially if I know I'm going to be attending a screener. I don't really want to give myself too much. So I was
sure.
actually not expecting a full-on rom-com. Um, and it seemed based on the writing that the film was kind of jumping between audiences. It was, sometimes catered for children, but sometimes mostly catered for adults.
Mm,
Um, Especially with the overarching theme of, the generational trauma, because,
yeah,
children don't have generational trauma, at least,
not
they
yet.
not yet.
Yeah.
But most millennials would definitely have some sort of generational trauma,
Mhm.
being children of mostly immigrant parents. So definitely felt like it was geared more towards adults.
Yeah, so I did look up just a little bit about the movie before going in. So it's directed by Peter Sohn, Sohn, who has only directed before The Good Dinosaur for Pixar, which is no one's favorite Pixar movie and is not remembered at all, really, unfortunately. But I found out that the director was heavily inspired by his own um, experiences with being a child of immigrants, and which is very prevalent in the movie, and we'll get into that. But also that he was really inspired by classic rom-coms like Guess Who's Coming to Dinner and Moonstruck, and you can definitely tell the influence there. It's pretty obvious, but unfortunately, and I always this always happens to me, especially when I watch a movie and I find out that the director is influenced by certain movies. When I can tell the influence in a movie that's not that great, I'm like, well, now I just want to watch Moonstruck. Well, it makes me. I'm like, oh, I see what you were going for, but it was so not well done. And, one of the many things I didn't like about this movie, which I don't like when they do in rom-coms specifically, is when supporting characters tell us how meant for each other the main characters are. There's literally, again, no, not a huge spoiler, but there's a part in this movie where, the two main characters, someone goes, "Oh, you guys are such a cute couple," or, "Oh, the chemistry is there." I'm like, "No, it isn't. No, it isn't."
Well, yeah, they're forcing it. They're forcing it on us.
Yeah.
Whereas in most well-written rom-coms, the writing will tell us that they're meant for each other, as
Mhm.
opposed to just being flat out told, "You two characters are meant to be together," and that's forcing it on us to believe this relationship. The fire people come from a completely separate world, and
Mhm.
they immigrated to this elemental town, element city, from that kind of like
Yeah.
utopian fire kingdom, and they're not really welcomed when they're in Elemental City. Like you said, that they were kind of like shunned upon and pushed into this little corner of a pocket of the city, and left to kind of fend for themselves. And the rest of the different elements look down on them because they see them as problem starters,
Mhm.
troublemakers, easily, able to cause a disaster because of the fire.
Yeah.
And because of that, they look down on everyone else as well. So there's this kind of internal feud
Mhm.
that is built in, an internal mechanism built into the fire people to not trust anybody. So very standard, very typical immigrant story of,
And see, now here's where the movie is such a problem for me, because I love the idea of telling an immigrant story. I mean, fantastic. But having them be elements muddies the whole thing for me. Like, I think it would have been so much more effective to just have these be human characters. Um, because and I've seen, on Twitter, since seeing the movie, uh it makes no having them be elements, it only fuels the fire, pardon the pun, of, like, why they shouldn't be there. Because as you see in the movie, when Ember the firewoman leaves Firetown to even to just go on the train, she bumps into, like, Earth people and sets them on fire, or, like, ruins the Wind people, and, like, so that seems like a bad, uh, metaphor. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, if an immigrant came to, Canada, they wouldn't hurt anyone by getting on the train.
Yeah, I know. I see exactly what you're trying to say. It makes a lot of sense, and they're not wrong in saying you can easily cause a problem or cause an explosion or cause this or cause damage. And
Yeah.
they're even in harm's way themselves. Like they're easily able to get in harm's way with the train having like splashing water everywhere all the
Oh,
time.
the fire people live next to the ocean, and we see in the movie that, like, getting on them could kill them. I'm like, maybe you shouldn't have moved here. It seems the problem with having the premise of this movie be that everyone is an element creates so many questions for an audience member that it distracts from the message that the director is trying to convey, which
Yeah,
is a huge problem because it is a great message about how hard immigrants work to build the courage and strength it takes to leave your homeland to go somewhere new to create a better life for your children is such a great message, but it gets lost in this movie where you're wondering things like, but wait a second, Earth people are made of wood and the fire people eat wood. Are they cannibals? Like, those types of questions pop up because the logic of this movie makes no sense.
yeah. I spent a lot of time. I don't know about you. I spent a lot of time just processing the functionality of this world,
Yeah.
and processing the information that was given to us about how things operate, and having to spend, like, you never spend that much time with other Pixar movies like Toy Story, or
Mm.
because they're toys in a world, they live in a bedroom, that is it, right? They're toys that can come to life. In Finding Nemo, it's just basically what if fish can talk. That's
Mhm.
pretty much it. There's not really much to process there. But this whole imaginary world where elements are people and the functionality of them having to coexist
Yeah.
leaves a lot of it's under a 2-hour movie, and you're spending so much time of that trying to process how does this actually function. Like then they bring you to a basketball game, and now you're processing like, okay, how does this work,
Mhm.
right? So I think there was just way too much information with the functionality of this world, Element City, and how it actually functions. And every scene you're just like, oh, look at that, that's cool. but then you're also trying to figure out, the relationships and the other undertoning stories that are being told. So there was just a lot to process at any time.
I think absolutely, and I think it was a huge example of style over substance, unfortunately. And to be honest, I don't even think it was that great style. Element City, honestly, to me, seemed like a Zootopia ripoff, more or less. And I think back to movies like Finding Nemo, where I was blown away by just the beauty and animation wonder of the ocean. And this is a movie about Elemental is a movie that takes place in this fantastical city, and I'm like, meh. It didn't grab me as much as earlier Pixar movies have, which is unfortunate. It seemed very reminiscent of things I'd seen before. It was just like I said, it confuses you and unfortunately makes you have to think too much. Which listen, it's good for a movie to make you think, but when it's distracting you from the central theme, it's bizarre. And I think back to a Pixar movie just last year, Turning Red, which in a similar way was about a family who there was very it was very important for the daughter to like learn about the traditions of the family and to sort of take over her mother's role eventually. And that was all done so well. And yes, there was an element of fantasy in the sense that the girl turns into a big red panda, but because they were human characters and there was a sense of relatability, it was so much easier to get the message. And
Absolutely.
I hate to harp on it, but just having them be elements made no sense. Because again, halfway through multiple times in the movie, the waterman is like, and the firewoman are both put in danger of various things, especially being around each other. And this is not the message the movie's trying to send. But as an audience member, I was like, maybe you shouldn't be together. It seems very dangerous. It seems like either one of you could die at any moment. Which
Yeah.
again is not the message the movie's trying to send. But unfortunately, having them be elements is messy.
Yeah.
In Turning Red, I loved that, the plot of the movie was, the girl and her friends trying to get tickets to a concert that they really wanna see, which again is such a relatable thing for so many young people. And when you're 13, 14, you're like, "Oh my god, this is the most important thing in the world. This makes so much sense." In this movie, the villain is not only generational trauma, but subpar city maintenance. Isn't that a great villain that kids love to see?
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. The
It was
main plot
not
is
relatable
the
at
two
all.
main characters trying to fight a ticket. Don't you
Yeah.
guys love that? Isn't that what kids wanna see?
No, you're absolutely right. And to add to that, the head of the department of citations left it on them, a city inspector, to fix the hole.
So, again, not to spoil anything for the movie, but what brings, Wade the water ban and Ember the firewoman together is that there's like safety problems in her dad's shop, and they have to solve a bigger problem that could affect the city, which you would think, hey, maybe the mayor should be in charge of, or someone in charge of maintenance, but it falls on a citizen and a city inspector. It's so weird. This movie it makes no sense. It
Yeah,
makes no sense.
it
And
made 0 sense.
and when you think about like all the incredible fantastical things that could happen in a movie where the premise is a city where elements live together, so much interesting stuff could happen.
Mhm.
But this movie is it's so bland. I mean, there are moments where it's cute. I'll have to admit there were times when I laughed. Catherine O'Hara is in this movie as Wade's mom, who is phenomenal. She's so funny. Um, and the guy who plays Wade is pretty good, and he gives a good performance. Um, but yeah, overall, I don't think this is going to be one that fans of Pixar will remember. I don't think so.
No.
Yeah, and there are multiple times in the movie where Wade and Ember are having conversations like "Oh, we can't be together. It's never been done before. It's too dangerous for us to be together. What would people think? It's we can't touch, we can't do this or that." And honestly, a lot of times in my head, I was thinking, yeah, this is very similar to conversations that queer people have when they're first starting to own their queerness and begin to think like, well, maybe I don't. Maybe I'm not a man who likes women. Maybe I'm not a woman who likes men. I was like, oh, this could have been such a good. If we're gonna do allegories, this would have been a great allegory for a queer couple, to be honest. And and so then, I mean, especially with the audience we were watching it with, to then have the audience break out into applause when this straight couple finally got to kiss, I was like, "Yay, okay, could have been gay." Just
They didn't even have any gay couples.
there was when they go to Wade's house for dinner, there is his cousin and her girlfriend are there. They get one line, and then we never see them again.
Okay. I tried to like I tried to like the fact that they were elements
Mm,
a lot. Um and I tried to like Ember.
yeah.
And even even as they didn't even make Ember a strong female character in any way.
Well, I just don't think she was a very unique character because I feel like a lot of what Ember goes through, wanting to make her father proud and bring honor to her family, it was very Mulan. It felt like, and
Yeah.
then there's also a part where an element to the story where she has to sort of control her temper or her firepower will sort of explode. And I was like, oh, this is very Elsa.
Hmm.
Um, so she just felt to me like a patchwork of characters and heroines we'd seen before.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, I don't think there's anything that really struck me as being unique with her, which I
Yeah.
thought was the problem mostly with her
Yeah.
character.
Even the way she was written early on in the film, where it showed her grow up in the
Mhm.
store, and every single time the father mentioned, which was hundreds of times, that you will be taking over the store once I retire, she always had this level of excitement.
Yeah.
So it was weird that they wrote her like that, that as soon as she was offered something slightly different, she jumped at it.
Mhm.
And she said, "Oh, I actually didn't want that at all." So again, just going back to the writing, they never really gave us any other than her temper tantrums, which at least not for the first majority of the movie part of the movie wasn't even connected to the shop.
Yeah.
Um, every time they mentioned her taking over the shop, she always was excited, and she kept even like really bothering her father and kept hassling him. When am I going to take it over? When am I going to take it over? So for her to switch so quickly, just with an offer to do
Yeah.
something different in her life, she jumped at it.
I think the movie spends a lot of time on the romance between her and Wade. And I think what would have been a much more effective use of that partnering is maybe he introduces her to her own interests and things outside of the shop.
Hmm.
I think so much of the movie is spent on like, ooh, cute montage date with Wade, and ooh, we're going to dinner with his family. Maybe if he was like, hey, I volunteer at this, art place. You want to come and see like what you do? Like what if you are interested in that, blah blah blah. Something something more to get to like show us that she has ideas and interests outside of the shop.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Her ability to mold glass
Mhm.
wasn't even something that was unique to her because all fire people could do it.
Yeah, and again, the movie tells us that, "Oh, you're so great at this," but we never see that. We never see like, "Oh, other fire people can't do that."
Yes, exactly. And she only uses the ability to mold glass in moments of dire need
Mhm.
to fix the the glass cabinet that someone smashed in the store,
Yeah.
to fix the doors that need to be closed. She only uses them as functionality. She doesn't We don't get moments. It would have made a lot more sense if we had some moments of her stressing about taking over the store and
Mhm.
maybe making glass molds in the basement in her room and hiding because she wants to do this. But we didn't even get that. That
No.
I don't know.
I think she was ultimately a pretty flat character written. Um, I could have just used so much more. I honestly, like I said, the amount of time the movie spends to romance, I think would have been much better allocated to fleshing out her character. And I think
Yeah.
that's one of the reasons why this isn't going to be a super well remembered Pixar movie